Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Magnolia Shine podcast. This is episode 10 of our show, and this is College Wednesday. And so you know that means that we're going to be talking some college football. I'm Trellis Williams, your host, alongside the one and only Blake Levine. Blake, what's going on?
Man, it's going good. I came across this stat earlier today that between Southern Miss, Jackson State, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State, none of these teams have lost to anyone outside of the state of Mississippi.
And that's a good thing to see right there. So we've seen some exciting things here in college football, and Jackson State has a bye week this week, but Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and USM all three be at it again this week. All of them out of conference games. Probably the headline of the weekend is going to be Ole Miss hosting Tulane. And both teams are 3-0 on the season. These teams have played each other a decent amount in recent years. This game will be in Oxford. Again, Tulane just beat Duke on the road, and so now taking on Ole Miss on the road. What you thinking, Blake, about this one?
Well, obviously the initial spread was 11.5 points, so Vegas, the betting odds feel like Ole Miss is a touchdown and a half favorite. If not, if you're betting the Ole Miss to cover, a 2-touchdown favorite over Tulane. The reality is they are a 2-touchdown better team. Now, that's not how we play football, and it's never how we're ever going to play football because
No.
Duke bought an $8 million quarterback, and they couldn't beat him. It's going to
Tulane's
be really
quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it's
Yeah.
going to be really interesting here because for Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin says he expects Austin Simmons to be the starter. The fans are asking for Trinidad Chambliss. I think both of them beat Tulane, but I think the best case scenario for Ole Miss is Austin Simmons starts and they do so well that Trinidad Chambliss gets to play, and it's an unofficial competition because the reality is next week they then get LSU. And that's the game where whichever quarterback, you're not going to be playing two quarterbacks that game because if you are playing two quarterbacks that game, that means the starter didn't do so well. So I think I'd like to think that Ole Miss is hoping there's a world where they can play both guys. And I know that's not something they're going to come out and say. And they don't have to do an SEC injury report this week. So I don't know if he's just talking Austin Simmons is going to be our starter and he's really hurt. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. But I think their hope is that they can play both, win the game, and feel like they have a real answer heading into LSU.
Yeah, you say that you think that maybe best case scenario for Ole Miss is that the starting quarterback with Austin Simmons plays so well that Chambliss is able to play. Man, I don't see that being the spread of this game. I don't see Ole Miss dominating Tulane. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a very close game. I mean, Tulane. This game's always very competitive between these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand that, but Ole Miss in non-conference games in recent years have blown these teams out for the most part. Now, I know when they went down to Tulane a couple years ago, that was a close game that they ended up, I think, covering the spread, but it was off a late fumble recovery for a touchdown. Excuse me if I'm
Something
wrong,
like
but I
that.
remember them. I remember them kicking like a 50-yard field goal to go up 3, and then they scored a touchdown late, and then it was 10 points. But it really was a pretty much a game-winning field goal prior to that last
Yeah.
drive. But for the most part, Ole Miss is really taking care of these non-conference games. Their losses have only come in conference. I think they dominate this game. I think they cover it no problem. But here's the deal. I think Lane Kiffin at the end of the day wants Austin Simmons to be the quarterback. The reality is he chose Austin Simmons out of camp. That means Trinidad Chambliss, Austin Simmons competed, quote unquote, competed for a job, and Austin Simmons won the job. I don't think Lane Kiffin chose Austin Simmons, a 19-year-old, because he felt like I owed it to him. That doesn't sound like something that Lane Kiffin would
No.
do. I owed it to him, and especially owed it to a 19-year-old. I don't care if this is his third season. He's 19 years old at the end of the day. So, and Trinidad Chambliss has played 3 years of Division II college. So I think they want Austin Simmons to be the starting quarterback. They think he's more talented. I think he's more talented. But the reality is they play LSU next week. and they need to win that game because they can play with 2 losses. They can have 2 losses and make the college football playoff. Well, that's one at home. You just don't want to drop a home game no matter who it is. Last year they beat Georgia and we thought, okay, here we go. That's the game they had to win. They go and they win it, but obviously they dropped the game to Florida late. And they play Florida again this year. They have to go to Georgia. There's a lot of games on the schedule that go, ooh, that could be a loss. They may be favored, but it could be. South Carolina, if they think that they're going to beat them 27-3 again, then they're sadly mistaken. Now, maybe they do after what we saw with Vanderbilt, but I think South Carolina is a better team than they were last year. And week in and week out, I think that's a close game. So LSU becomes a quote unquote unofficial must win. And I think this game, they take more than care of Tulane.
Yeah, I got Ole Miss as well, but I think it's narrow. I think it's a one-score game. I think it comes down to the end. I think Rebels fans are a little nervous at the end of the game, but I think Ole Miss does take care of the win. But I think it's going to be closer than you think, but I got Ole Miss as well. We got Mississippi State and Northern Illinois. Now, listen, for Bulldogs fans, that could make you just slightly wondering because this Northern Illinois team knocked off Notre Dame last year. I don't think this is going to happen for them again. I think Mississippi State's going to take care of business here, especially at home. But listen, you can never be too sure because Toledo came in there last year and won by like 30. But this is a different Mississippi State team this year.
I'll shave my mustache if Northern Illinois wins. They're
Oh,
not
wow.
winning this game. They're not winning.
Listen,
this
hey,
game.
look. You know Blake's confident that Mississippi State's going to win if he's going to give up his mustache for it. We'll have to see about this.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, absolutely. There's no shot. The same way I said there's no shot Southern Miss was going to beat Mississippi State. There was no shot that Jackson State was going to beat Southern Miss. If this game was last year, I might have picked Northern Illinois. But there is no reason for Mississippi State to lose this game. They're just the superior team. And they've shown me early in this year that when it came to Southern Miss, as they were the superior team, they played a superior 60 minutes. Now you could say, oh, but it was close early. Well, every game's close early. It starts 0-0. Okay.
That's right.
They were the superior team for 60 minutes. Alcorn State, there was no messing around in that game. And I know that's an FCS team that's struggling, but there was no mess around in that game. That was boom, it's over. I think, and then Arizona State, look, they came out and for 30 minutes went 17-0, right?
Yeah.
And they take that lead, and then obviously they give it back. But the reality is I watched Mississippi State dominate Arizona State for 30 minutes and 2 minutes, or 31 minutes if you want to do the 30 minutes of the first half and then the 1 minute of the second half where they threw the touchdown on the final drive. But the reality is they dominated more minutes in that game against Arizona State. I think there's no shot that Northern Illinois wins. I don't care that they beat Notre Dame last year. That's a wonderful win for them. But there's no Toledo this year. All the losses that Mississippi State is going to face is going to be in conference. Impressive 4-0.
I agree with you. I definitely think Mississippi State's going to win, and partially because of what you just said. Mississippi State started all 3 of their games very well this year. I mean, even the Southern,
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think that Northern Illinois is going to have what it takes to take a good start from Mississippi State. I think the only way Mississippi State would lose a game like this is if Northern Illinois jumps on them from the beginning. So I would totally agree with you on that. Now we move to USM. They're going to take on Louisiana Tech. It's a non-conference game for them as Louisiana Tech is in the Conference USA. It's a throwback to used to be conference back when USM was in the Conference USA. This used to be a conference battle. I had to go check it to make sure if it was or not. But Louisiana Tech is in the Conference USA. USM's in the Sun Belt. But this will be the first road game for the Golden Eagles, and they are sitting at 2-1 now. I don't know what to take from this, but I'm going to go with the Golden Eagles because I think they're riding high right now.
I'm going to take Southern Miss, but I'm not very confident about it because, I'm somebody that, I go with my eyes. I go, ooh, okay, what would be the betting odds on this? And, I like to guess the betting odds before. I'm a big guy with that. And I said, okay, well, Southern Miss, they're playing on Louisiana Tech. It's on the road. Okay, let me think. Okay, I think Southern Miss favored by 1.5. Well, then it comes out La Tech's favored by 2.5, 3, depending on the site that you're looking at. And I
Wow.
go, ooh, what do they know that I don't know? I think Southern Miss, I'd take them in this game, but I don't feel confident. Excuse me on that. But I think for Charles Huff, I said the first test was week 1. Well, we got test 2 now, right? What test 2 is, are you the type of coach that doesn't let your team let down after a nice win? After your first big win, right?
Yeah.
You beat Jack State like you should. You lose to Mississippi State like I thought you expected. App State, solid football team, and you just kicked their butt? Okay, a
Yep.
lot of teams with not great coaches let down that next week. They go, oh, wow, we just got Coach Huff. The practice isn't the same. It's just the vibe. They don't come out hot. They let Louisiana Tech, they spot them 10 points, whatever it is. So for me, it's going to be really interesting to see what type of coach Huff is. Is he somebody that is very good at convincing his team? Forget about last week. That was a great win. Don't get me wrong. But now we're on to next week, because every coach says that, but not every coach can execute what he says to the players and then have it come out onto the field.
Yeah, I think Coach Huff's doing a good job, because I think they're playing inspired football, and I think it was a good start to the season for them to take on Mississippi State. So a good challenge to begin. Jackson State allowed them to kind of work some of the kinks out, and they finished well in that game. And then beating App State, I think you got a team that's ready to play some ball this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if you're Jackson State, you feel pretty good, right? Like, hey, we
Yeah.
played as an FCS team against Southern Miss for about a half. And, if we don't commit a few calls, maybe it's a 1-2 score game and blah, blah, blah. And look how they just beat App State. I told you. I mean, Jack State's defense is for real. And Southern Miss, I said that was a guaranteed win. They guaranteed won it, and been impressive early. It's just gonna depend, because you just don't know week to week in college football, right? And we saw this in the NFL, right? The Detroit Lions were never going to win another game after losing to the Packers, and then they blow out the Bears. Or the Kansas City Chiefs. So they look bad the first 2 weeks. They're not going to make the playoffs. We all know they're going to make the playoffs. So college, obviously, a little more week to week, where it's more important than an NFL season, where you can lose it any given week, and it's not like you're out of the playoff hunt, right then and there. But Southern Miss, it'll be interesting to see how the consistency of a season with all the new players, like where the depth is, because the teams that win at the lower FBS level are teams that have depth, because they're going to have guys get hurt. And do they have as many top tier players for their level, like maybe a Texas would, right? Texas loses one of their defensive tackles, well, they probably plug in another 4 or 5 star right away. If Southern Miss loses their best cornerback, what level cornerback are they at 3 and 4? In the depth side of things.
Yeah, so that wraps up our major Mississippi schools for this week. Jackson State, Alcorn, North Valley, none of the three of them. They're all in bye weeks this week. Of course, Blake, you're not allowed to talk about Valley, so we wouldn't talk about, so we can't talk about them anyway, apparently. Or at least I would have to talk about it myself. But anyway, so
No, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want me to say? Here's, I want to put my voice to this, because sometimes it comes out weird, because obviously the Valley fans obviously hate me now, and whatever. I can't do this. I get called every name in the book. I'm this, I'm that. One person said, that's why I've been fired from every job I've ever been to, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that. I gotta go back and I gotta go back and check my thing, right? Like, it was something like, no, Trellis. It was something like, this is why he's been let go from every job he's ever had. And I was like, boy, man, first off, I'm 30 years old. I'd like to think I haven't had that many jobs. And then what was really messed up is they took a shot at WJTV, and I was like, man, I love WJTV. That was a great place to work, and all those things. And they took a shot at them, like the worst Jackson station. I was like, man, what they do? Like, that was insane. I don't understand why we need to try to trick ourselves and lie to ourselves. The situation that they're in is awful. And this
Yeah,
idea, well, Blake doesn't want to
it's
help. He's
tough.
just talking bad. He's just talking bad. Well, maybe it's bringing light to it of something that, we know that's happening, and maybe we just need to talk about it a little more. The reality is for them, the last week they had gambling allegations against former players that played on the
Yeah.
basketball team. They lost their soccer program, which is a fine. Their football team got blown out for the second straight week, and where are we going? I mean, the basketball team's winning going 3-30 every year. Baseball, maybe a couple wins. Football, one win maybe a year. Sometimes zero. Maybe if they get lucky, two. And I'm the bad guy because I say it out loud.
Yeah, they're in a pretty tough spot there, and I think you might know a little bit more about this than I do. Like why they stay at the Division 1 level, because the thing is that if they drop down to being to being like a Division 2 team or something like that, they would be able to compete at that level. Like all of a sudden now
Maybe.
you're reinvigorated. I mean, obviously they lose to some Division 2 programs, but they would not be the bottom Division 2 team. Just to be clear, they wouldn't be.
But maybe I don't know if West Point went up to 6A, I bet you they'd be just as dominant, and if they went down to 4A, they'd be just as dominant because winning teams find ways to win and losing teams find ways to lose. And does that mean if they
Yeah,
drop to Division 2, if they drop to Division 2, would they just spend a little bit less than all the division, right? Like, would they just readjust their I guess
yeah,
funding, like, or are they going to spend the same just in division, right? Like, or do they convince themselves, oh, okay,
yeah,
well, let's do this. So that's where, like, I don't know if I don't know what the best case scenario for them is. They're going to need some dynamic change at some point. I don't see it anywhere in the near future how they're going to be competitive in any given sport. They're going to win games from time to time because it's college athletics and they do have scholarship athletes on their team. So just like the worst team in the NFL is going to win a couple games, Valley's going to win games here and there. Like they're not going to. I hope they don't go winless, but I guess it's possible. There's just going to need to be some dynamic change, and it's not Terrell Buckley's fault. It's not any of the coaches on the team's fault. It's matter of fact, it's not even the players' fault. At some point, this is a higher problem.
yeah. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that as time goes on, but kind of moving a little bit into some SEC football because we talk about that as well here on College Wednesday, our special on the Magnolia Shine podcast. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button, by the way. Hit the subscribe button right now. Like and share with anyone who's interested in Mississippi high school sports and then also college football as well, as we were talking about today. So in college football, this week, I will say this, not the most jam-packed week of like blockbuster games, I will say. But we got a few. And in the SEC, you got Auburn and Oklahoma, two undefeated teams taking each other on. These are two top 25 teams. And Oklahoma's looked really good. Auburn's kind of looked a little bit better than expected. And Hugh Freeze is over there, and he's in a position where he needs to raise the bar for Auburn because Auburn's used to a little bit better level of play. Now, I will say so far it seems like they're delivering. They're 3-0 so far. It's a big game for them. What you thinking about this matchup, Blake?
Well, I know Jackson Arnold's excited. I mean, I got to think he's really excited for this game against Oklahoma. But yeah, I think for me, I actually think this is a game that Auburn actually wins. I've been really impressed with them early. I think Oklahoma's one really impressive win over Michigan. I'm still not sure how good Michigan really is. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't feel. I think this is a big game, like you said, for Hugh Freeze, and just the tenor of Auburn fans of the program, and because this is a few years in now, and I just want to see one big win. I just want to see one win where I go, wow, we wanted them to show up, and they showed up exactly how we wanted them to. So this is massive for them. For Oklahoma, yeah, they think they're a playoff team. I don't think they'll get there, but I feel like for Oklahoma, they did deliver on that one big win already this year, and they'll probably have a couple more. I just think Auburn still is not there, and the Baylor win is not a big win. This would be a big win.
Yeah, and I'd agree. Even though the Baylor win didn't look that bad after they went and beat SMU the next week on the road, but then you wonder about SMU. And then when we're talking about Oklahoma and their win over Michigan, I mean, listen, Michigan hasn't been any good since they can't cheat anymore. You know what I mean? So like,
Stop. Stop.
so I don't know. I don't know about Michigan, but I think Oklahoma wins this game. I
Okay.
think their home field. I mean, they got a lot of good energy there. I think it's going to be a very good game, and I think the Sooners end up pulling it out. But I think it's going to be a very good one, and I think Auburn's a very good team as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
Yeah, well, next one is South Carolina and Missouri. So I think it's easy for everyone to write South Carolina off after getting beat 31-7 by Vanderbilt at home. And if you just saying that statement, you got beat 31-7 by Vanderbilt at home, that sounds like rock bottom. But I will say this, Vanderbilt I think is like a good football team right now. We'll see how long this happens for their program, how good they are. But like right now, this year they are very good. And so I don't view that as being as negative of a thing. And South Carolina is one of those teams, and we saw it last year. They're up and down. They're just an up and down team. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think I'm going to pull. I'm going to say South Carolina wins this one and knocks off Missouri, which is going to shock everybody just by going from losing to Vanderbilt at home by a lot to beating Missouri. But I think South Carolina might pull this one out.
But that's part of what makes the conference so great, right? Is that
Yeah.
I think South Carolina is going to win this game too, right? And I think
Oh
that's what
wow.
makes this conference just so great is that you have that. And when it comes to Vanderbilt, they got to be so happy they got Diego Pavia back. I mean, I know he begged for that extra year and he got it and really impressive.
Yeah.
However, I disagree with you. That is an embarrassing loss, 31-7 to anybody when you're South Carolina and you think you're a
Yeah.
top 10
Exactly. I
team.
agree.
Losing 31-7. Look, they lose that game 27-24, and it's like, man, Vanderbilt, like they're good, but South Carolina's kicking themselves. No, that's not kicking themselves. They got kicked and they got knocked down and they never came back
Yeah.
up. And I don't care. And I don't care that Lenore Sellers got hurt. I mean, they were kicking their butt before Lenore Sellers went down. It wasn't that. Vanderbilt was just the superior team on Saturday. But I think South Carolina then comes back and they win this week. I mean, that's kind of the fun of this conference.
I I agree with you on that. So South Carolina, Missouri, we'll see what happens there. That will be on Saturday as well. Florida and Miami. Now, uh, you know, it's unfortunate for Florida because I don't think Florida's like that bad. I gotta say, I don't think they're that bad. They competed pretty hard with LSU on the road. But
Yeah, except for
LSU,
the 5 picks from their quarterback. I mean, they throw 5 picks and they still, feel like they were competitive, which
yes,
tells me, could you have just thrown two? Just throw two interceptions instead.
I know it. I know it. Like seriously. So like, I don't think Florida's that bad, but I think they're gonna get stomped in this game because Miami is just. I don't know. Like they seem really good to me. I mean, here's another thing too. So Florida lost to USF. I think Florida would be a better team than USF. I think if they played each other a bunch of times, I think Florida wins most of the time. So I think that was one of the rare times that USF won. But we saw USF beat Florida, and then we saw Miami beat USF like they stole something. You know what I mean? Like they beat the mess out of them. So I think the Hurricanes win this one. They're also at home, and I think Miami's a great team.
Yeah, I think Miami's one of the 5 best teams in the country right now, and they're playing with such great vibes. Right? We talk about
Yeah,
the vibes of a college football team week in and week out for a season. And last year, I mean, could you imagine if they put Cam Ward on this team? Look, I think Carson Beck's
yeah,
been phenomenal. Carson Beck might be a finalist for the Heisman. Heck, he might even win it. I don't think so, but he might even win it. And if you stuck Cam Ward on this team, whoa, like that would be is that the best team? And yet Carson Beck's actually played really well too. Their defense is so much more improved than last year. This is just so tough because I agree with you. I don't even think Florida's that bad. I think they're 6-6 good. Like I think they're solid. Like they're all right.
yeah.
And they're just gonna get absolutely crushed by Miami. And people are gonna laugh. And Napier's probably gonna lose his job this week. And that's that.
Yeah, which it's tough. I mean, just think about this, Blake. I mean, how much do you think Florida wishes they would have just held on to Dan Mullen? Because the thing is that I saw a comparison of records, and they fired Dan Mullen like after he went 7-5 or something like that. And I don't know. I don't know. Where Dan
No,
Mullen's sitting at 3-0 right now.
look, I thought that was a crazy idea because what the crazy part of it was not moving on from Dan Mullins because it was more than just the record, right? They felt like Dan Mullins wasn't recruiting as hard as he should. They felt like not that he quit on the program, but he just the investment wasn't there, and that sucks because I'd like to think that that wasn't the case, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I wasn't in the building for that.
Yeah.
But no, Dan Mullins is a really good football coach. Mississippi State knows it. Florida now realizes it. UNLV is getting all of it. He's a good football coach. He may not be a great football coach, but man, he's a dang good football coach. And the problem that I had with what Florida did, and I actually said it at the time, I wish we were doing the show at the time, is they didn't fire Dan Mullins for a top tier coach. They fired Dan Mullins for the hope of the next big coach. And that's a tough sell. That's a tough sell when you're
Yeah.
Florida. When you're Florida, you feel like, no, we should take another guy from this high level. We should steal a Lane Kiffin. We should get a Kalen DeBoer. I know Kalen DeBoer struggled with Alabama, but that, people, we should go get a Dan Lanning. Sorry. So, but instead they hire down and they get Billy Napier, who, at the time was viewed as a really good football coach. But we've seen it so many times. Guys go from smaller school up. Mel Tucker's an example too. Charlie Strong, I'm trying to think of some other ones. I mean, heck, Ole Miss hired Matt Luke. I mean, that was an insane move to hire Matt Luke, and they did it. And they did it. Just like Mississippi State rushed in and hired Zach Arnett because they felt like they had to. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see, how, and Billy Napier is now just one of those guys Scott Frost, Nebraska, right? A
Yeah.
guy that how could Scott Frost not? But it doesn't always work. And sometimes it does. Sometimes,
Yep.
Oregon hires Dan Lanning and it works beautifully. But it doesn't always work. And if you're Florida, they should try to get a more secure coach this time around. Maybe someone that's already in the Power Fours at the highest level.
Yeah, it would seem that way, but man, it's tough for Florida. Gators fans, they have such high standards, but the way that the teams have been playing the last few years, they'll show some teams that are competitive and get some wins or whatever. But for Florida fans, they don't view that as success. Mississippi State fans are a little different. You know what I mean? Where it's like, if you go 8-4 and you beat a couple of good teams, like how it was when Dan Mullen was coaching Mississippi State. It was like, man, awesome. Like, this is a fun team or whatever. Man, Florida, it's like their standards are so high that, you go 8-4 and it's like, oh, that's a bummer. But they've been going like 6-6 and 5-7 and stuff. So I'm surprised he's really hung on as long as he has.
I think the late last year and the way DJ Lagway played saved his job. But to be honest with you, and I say this too, if you spent 9 games of the year, 8 games of the year going, this guy's not returning, and you let 1 or 2 games late season convince you that you're bringing him back, the sample size was bigger to let him go than the sample size to keep him. And if you were scared of losing DJ Lagway because of that, maybe, but look where you are with him, right? Like maybe you needed the whole reset, and maybe you do lose the quarterback, and that it sucks, but that's part of the process.
It is. Well, folks, that will wrap up our College Wednesday right here on the Magnolia Shine podcast. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, like the video and share it with anyone who's interested in college football for College Wednesday, but then we cover high school football. And today's Wednesday, tomorrow is Thursday, and we're going to be back, and we'll be talking about high school football for this week. And we got a big week in high school football, so we're going to be discussing that, and we're excited about that, Blake. But listen, we're looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love Thursdays.
For sure. Folks, this is Blake Levine with me alongside myself, Trellis Williams. This is the Magnolia Shine podcast. We out.